Good afternoon, all. Good afternoon. This is Pastor Charles here in North Alabama from Forward Christian Life Center in Nashville, Tennessee. I had not altogether anticipated doing, hold on one second here. Sorry about that. I had not altogether anticipated doing my podcast today. I wasn't able to do it yesterday. I am still wrestling with the effects of the flu. I've been coughing still. Today, I think I'm doing a good bit better. I'm certainly hopeful that that is the case. And so anyway, today I was watching a number of things online and looking at things as I always look at things. And honestly, folks, I became so impassioned and so frustrated at the same time and upset with things that are going on in our country right now that I thought to myself, man, I've got to get online. I've got to talk to the people. I've got to let them know what's going on in truth, because frankly, much of the media is not, most of the media is not, and quite frankly, excuse me, if I may say so myself, I don't think a lot of the podcasts are altogether doing their job and getting this right either, folks. This disturbs me. You know, this reminds me of what I see happening in the church. So many in the church are not doing things as they ought to be doing things. There are a few, but very few, and I certainly respect and appreciate those that are. But now I'm seeing in the online world as well as in the media world that they are not doing their job. The media is absolutely failing us miserably at this time. You'll see in a moment why those things are happening that are happening. But also many of the podcasts, for those of you that watch podcasts like the Midas Touch Network or Steve Schmidt, whom I love Steve Schmidt. I'm not quite as keen on Midas Touch because, frankly, I think they have a habit of using hyped up, video titles in order to gain viewership, and I don't think their content matches the title, and that frustrates me. I can't stand that people are allowed to go on YouTube and various video platforms and post videos about stuff, and they post these ridiculous headlines, and yet in reality the headline that they're posting honestly is just hype. It really doesn't match what they're offering in the way of information, and so that kind of frustrates me. But I think the hour calls for a clarion warning. I think it's time for somebody to get on the trumpet and start blowing and sounding the horn and alerting the people of America as to what is happening in our country right now. Our nation has suffered for God only knows how long, probably since the beginning of time, since the beginning of our republic. Our nation has suffered from a very poorly educated populace when it comes to matters of government and politics. People in this country are ignorant as a brick. Most people in this country are ignorant as a brick. That includes many people who are very accomplished. They've achieved a great deal. They've acquired a good deal of money. They have built businesses. They've become doctors. They've become entrepreneurs. And yet, in the area of politics and in the area of government in the United States of America, they are completely ignorant. And unfortunately, this country has suffered time and time again because most people, I'm gonna dare say most people in this country have long been under the misguided notion that a president has unbridled power. You know, we have movies like Dave where I can't think of the actor's name off the top of my head, but he is able to become president and he just all of a sudden starts changing things and doing things, boy, because he wants to help people and he wants to do the right thing, and he just starts doing all these things. And people watch these movies and they honestly believe that a president has unbridled power. And when the actual government that has been given to us by our founding fathers functions as it ought to, most of the time in the past, presidents would express perhaps their frustration that they weren't able to do what they had wanted to do or what they would like to have done. However, it was impeded either by Congress or it was impeded by the Supreme Court, the other branches of government, which are there to provide checks and balances so that no one branch of government holds the full reins of power. That's how our government was designed. But sadly, most people in America have no idea how our government is designed to work. They go to the polls, they bounce back and forth between parties every election. Well, I'm not happy with this guy, so now I'm going to vote for the other party. Then the other party comes in and they say, well, he didn't do anything. He didn't do what he said he was going to do. He didn't do what I wanted him to do. So now I'm going to vote for this other party. And we keep going back and forth, back and forth. We may re-elect an individual so that they're able to serve 2 full terms. However, when the next election comes, almost without fail, we're going to wind up flopping over to the other party. The reason this occurs in America primarily is because people have no concept how our government is designed to work, how it is meant to work. When they see it functioning, listen to me, folks, when they see it functioning exactly as it was designed to function, they think that people are doing things they ought not to be doing. Well, that shouldn't be that way. You know, Congress shouldn't be able to do that, and the Supreme Court shouldn't be able to make these decisions. And you can't legislate in the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court doesn't legislate. You know, therefore, their ruling shouldn't be. Well, that's idiotic. If the ruling of the Supreme Court is not to be federally enforced and applied, then what on earth do we have a Supreme Court for? So anyway, we have people in this country that do not understand, they do not get how our government is designed to work. And secondly, and listen carefully to this point, they certainly do not understand the wisdom in our founding fathers designing our republic in the manner that it was designed. They don't understand the absolute wisdom that was used by our founding fathers in drafting the Constitution of the United States. When you are so removed in history, when you're so removed from being under a king, for instance, people in this country going back 200 years have not been under a king. They've never sat under a king. Up until, maybe the first 40 or 50 years or so, many of the citizens, as well as many of the politicians in this country, had at one time been under the King of England. Perhaps they had been under the monarchy in France or Spain. So there were many people who were familiar with monarchy. They were familiar with a church-state hybrid, and they were familiar with the head of state also being the head of the church in their country. However, once we got past the mid-1800s, by the time we got close to the Civil War era, I think most people at that point were of a generation that they had not sat under a monarchy. They had not sat under a king. And I think that in part is what caused the erosion to begin concerning our appreciation of the wisdom that was built into our Constitution. Government does not work quickly in a constitutional republic like ours. It requires that popular opinion be swayed, which is important. The way that our government is designed, the idea is that the leadership, be it Congress or be it the Senate or be it the president, that our leadership communicate fully and carefully and completely to the public that which they desire to do, and the public get behind them. If the public gets behind them in their vision, in their goal, then we are supposed to participate in the process. We participate in the process. In the modern era, we participate by sending an email to our representative or sending an email to our senator, or sending an email to the White House for that matter, or writing a letter or making a phone call. This is how the people are able to participate in the process. Many people, of course, don't like many of the things that were done by Ronald Reagan, and I cannot say as I disagree, although at the time I was in fact a Reagan Republican, but in retrospect I've come to understand a lot of things I really didn't see at that time. Many people find fault with Ronald Reagan, but there was one skill that Ronald Reagan had that very few presidents throughout history, except maybe Franklin Delano Roosevelt, many presidents lacked, and that was the ability to communicate. When Ronald Reagan was trying to do something, and he was trying to get something through the Senate or through the House, he would make phone calls. He would call the senators. He would call the congressmen. He would talk to them personally. He would communicate with them personally. He would try to persuade them to get behind what he was trying to do. But more than this, he would go on television and he would speak to the American public. And he would articulate what he was trying to do and why he was trying to do it. And he would encourage people, get on the phone, call your senator, call your congressman. So he encouraged the people to be involved in the process. See, the problem with Americans is we want to elect somebody to govern, and then we want to gripe and complain about, quote, government, meaning those people up there that we sent up there to represent us. However, in truth, we are lazy people, because we are supposed to be a government of the people, for the people, by the people. Our responsibility does not end at the ballot box. That is the mistake that most people make. They think, I elect somebody to handle the government aspect of things. I elect a congressman. I elect senator. I do this so that I don't have to be bothered. No, wrong. You don't do it so that you don't have to be bothered. You do it so that you have someone, if you are able to elect someone who is in agreement with the vision that you have personally for our country, that you have someone in Washington that you will be able to communicate with, and they will be sympathetic to your ideals, your values, your thoughts. And so the idea is we do not elect somebody simply to do the job for us. Listen carefully. But we're supposed to elect people who do the job with us. Okay? That is how genuinely representative government works. You hear congressmen and senators all the time talking about their constituency. You hear them talking about doing town halls and going back to their district or back to their state, conducting meetings so that the public can attend and the public can offer insight, they can offer critique, they can offer advice, they can offer suggestions. You hear senators, especially right now with all that's going on with Doge and Elon Musk, you hear senators on the news now talking all the time about the number of phone calls that their office is receiving, or the number of letters or postcards or emails that their office is receiving. Folks, this is how democracy is supposed to work. After the Constitution had been agreed upon, and it was ready then to be presented to the states for ratification, someone asked Ben Franklin, "So, Mr. Franklin, what form of government have you all decided upon?" Benjamin Franklin is said to have responded, "A republic, if we can keep it." Well, the reason Mr. Franklin said this is because within our democratic republic, listen to me carefully, folks, there were a number of weaknesses. Okay? It is impossible, listen, to create a constitutional republic based on democratic ideals and principles and processes. It is impossible to create a government of that nature and not have certain inherent weaknesses. One of our greatest weaknesses, and people are going to spit out their teeth when I say this, but listen carefully to what I'm saying. One of our inherent weaknesses is the freedom of speech. Say, what do you mean? Freedom of speech? Well, that's one of the greatest powers that, one of the greatest rights as Americans that we have. Yes, it is. But with freedom of speech comes a weakness. The most evil, the most vile, the most contemptuous among us also possess that freedom. And because of our Constitution, we are not in a position to silence them. If government makes any effort to silence them, they go to court. They say their freedom of speech is being impeded or stomped upon. And of course, the courts come back and say, this is true. Your freedom of speech, whether the court agrees with what these people are saying or not, it doesn't matter. The reality is they have the right to speak. Well, when you have a demonic, evil man like Donald Trump running for president, he is able to butcher and abuse that freedom of speech. He is able to lie incessantly. He is able to gaslight incessantly. He is able to tell you the sky is green when the sky is in fact blue. He is able to tell you the grass is purple when in fact the grass is green. He has the right and the freedom to utter whatever trash, whatever garbage enters into his head. Anything he wishes to say, he has the freedom to say. Therefore, the freedom of speech, while it is in fact one of our greatest liberties in America, it is simultaneously one of our greatest weaknesses. There are a number of weaknesses within our Constitution. One area of a constitutional republic that is a constant area of weakness. Constitutional democracies, constitutional republics can only function properly when you have men and women of goodwill controlling the levers of power. The minute one district in one state elects an individual who is not going into their office with a mindset of goodwill. In other words, they're not going in to cooperate. They're not going in to work with their body as a team, as it were. Okay? Now, I don't know about you, but when I was a kid in gym, our teacher would often go down the line of all the boys and he'd say 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And then one would split off and be one team. The twos would split off and be another team. You were all still students in the same school. but now you were on different teams. So you were playing for different objectives, okay? Within our government, the party system allows for there to be two teams, okay? One team is representing, or supposed to be representing, a more responsible, conservative fiscal policy, what have you. The other team is supposed to be representing a more liberal, a more giving, a more compassionate, a more charitable position in terms of what they believe government to be able to do for the people that are served, we the people. Nowhere within the Constitution is it provided for that either party should dictate the morality or the behavior of the other. No, we start out with the premise that all men are created equal and we have the right to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Life, live your life as you desire to live your life. Liberty, have the freedom to do as you wish to do. The pursuit of happiness, to find your happiness however and wherever you find your happiness. This notion of trying to legislate morality and legislate behavior is something that entered into our government, into our parties, into our system fairly early, and it became much greater a problem as we approached the 1980s, the rise of the moral majority headed up by Jerry Falwell, and the rise of the religious right trying to wield power in our nation. You know, all of a sudden it was, we have the right, we have the liberty to worship God. We have the right to believe as we choose to believe. We have the right to preach what we believe to be true. Bless God. Hallelujah. We have the right to assembly and to come together as Christians and as Muslims and as Jews and Hindus and to build houses of worship and to conduct ministry. We have that right. But those people over there do not have the right to live their life this way or that way. They do not have the right to do this or to do that. So the viewpoint becomes very skewed. All of a sudden, you're imbued with all these rights and liberties. You're able to pursue happiness in the manner that you desire to pursue happiness. However, these over here, no, they don't have that right. They don't have that liberty, and they cannot pursue their happiness in the manner that they choose. And so, what we begin to see with Newt Gingrich and the rise of the hyper-Republicans in government, Newt Gingrich was one of the first folks who began to demonize the Democratic Party, to demonize Democrats. He is the one, and of course Fox News was right on his heels in formation. And so now the Republican Party was able to use social issues as a means of placing a wedge between us and them, placing a wedge between the left and the right, the Democrat and the Republican. And Hitler said that there is nothing more powerful than religious belief. He said, you cannot argue reason and expect to get the same amount of passion as you will get if you utilize religious beliefs. Once you start claiming to be the party that represents a certain field of religious belief, all of a sudden, all the people who believe that way become very passionate, very supportive. Boy, they're going to get behind you. And as the son of one of the earliest anti-abortion ministers in America, Francis Schaeffer, the son of Francis Schaeffer, as his son has said, these issues also tend to inspire people to give. If you want to fill your coffer, if you want to raise money for your re-election campaign, the easiest way to do that is not on tax reform. It is not going to be on protecting Social Security. It's not going to be on those issues. No. If you want to gain the most passionate outpouring of financial support, you need to go to a wedge issue. You need to go to a religious issue, because you will motivate an entire voting bloc in such a way that the money will just pour in. And the son of Francis Schaeffer has said that this is what happened and that they learned this. And they literally, the early leaders in the anti-abortion movement saw this. They saw what happened when they used the abortion issue as their primary issue. All of a sudden, boy, the money just started pouring in. People just started throwing money at them. So now we are in a position where we have one party that is not only wanting to infringe upon your personal liberties, they're wanting to infringe upon the way in which you are able to pursue happiness. They want to use their, what they call biblical, which frankly, as the minister of the gospel, they're full of baloney. They are twisting and perverting scripture all too often in order to create a position that is not genuinely found in scripture. The anti-gay, the anti-abortion, these positions, folks, both of those are based upon a gross perversion of the Word of God. I can tell you that. Up until the 1970s, the Southern Baptist Convention was publishing statements and agreeing upon platform items that supported a woman's right to choose. So right up until the 1970s, even evangelicals in America, even the fundamentalists in America, supported a woman's right to choose. All it took was one individual to decide that this issue, we can make this an issue, and we then can use this issue to manipulate those individuals on the religious right. We can secure an entire voting bloc simply by embracing this position, anti-abortion, anti-gay. If we approach things from these perspectives, we will lock in these people. Now, when I was younger, growing up in the Pentecostal church, we had people in our church who were Republican. We had people in our church who were Democrat. My grandparents were dyed-in-the-wool fundamentalists. They were fundamentalists all the way down the line, Assemblies of God fundamentalists. homophobic like you wouldn't believe. But until the day they died, they were also passionate Democrats. They never changed party. They never embraced the Republican Party in any way, shape, size, or form. When I registered as a Republican at the age of 18, my grandfather had a fit. Boy, he read me the Riot Act and let me know. He said, one of these days you're going to wake up and realize that the Republican Party is nothing more, he didn't use these words, but this is what he was saying, nothing more than a bunch of oligarch wannabes who are trying to protect the interests of the ultra-wealthy and the ultra-rich. Thank God my grandfather's words proved to be prophetic, and I indeed did come around and see this, and I abandoned the Republican Party, at first becoming an independent, and then finally I decided, you know what, this is absurd. I agree far more with the democratic values and the policies and objectives of the Democratic Party than I do the Republican Party. So instead of registering as a as an independent, I made the decision to register as a Democrat. Boy, I'm getting twisted today. All right, folks. That's the problem we have in this country, okay? People vote because they think that the president has unfettered ability to go in and do whatever he wants. And that is wrong. That is so wrong. They don't understand that he needs to be able to communicate what he wants to do and why he wants to do it and how that will benefit our nation, to not only members of his own party, but to members of the other party as well, so that he might secure enough votes to get the support of Congress, to get the support of the Senate. And even then, if he is able to get something done with the support of the Senate and with the support of the House, and he's able then and then only to sign it into law, there still is the constitutional muster that it must pass. And if someone challenges in court this new law, then they can pursue that challenge all the way to the Supreme Court. And it is the job of the Supreme Court then to weigh in. Notice the Supreme Court does not weigh in before the law is written, before it is signed into law by the president. No, the Supreme Court is, excuse me, sorry about that. The Supreme Court is an after-the-fact check. Once the law has actually been signed into existence, once it takes effect, those who may be adversely affected by said law are then able to go to court. Okay, they go through the courts, they wind up before the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court then determines whether or not this law, listen carefully, based on actual case examples, is able to be supported by the Constitution or is negated by the Constitution. So once the law goes into effect, you see, then basically what it amounts to is you wind up with kind of a little test period. You kind of wind up with a little test run period where this law is actually able to be in effect, and it's able to affect people either in a positive way or in an adverse way. Now, sometimes the law may affect you in an adverse way. However, that is not to say that the law in any way violates the Constitution. So there are times when the Supreme Court will hand down a decision and they'll say, no, this law is acceptable. This law certainly, by our reading, this law certainly is not in violation of the Constitution of the United States, and that law will stand. However, in those instances where the Supreme Court determines that the law in some way is in violation of the Constitution of the United States, either it tramples the liberty of the people, or it tramples upon their freedom of speech, or it tramples upon their freedom to assembly, etc., etc. In those instances, then, they are able to strike down that law. And when that law is struck down, then their decision becomes the law of the land. Okay? This is how the issue of gay marriage, for instance, was able to go through the courts, wound up before the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court decided that LGBT people have every right to marry. They have every right. Now, they're not supposed to be a religious body, okay? The Supreme Court is not supposed to be any more a religious body than the Congress is, or the Senate is, or for that matter, the presidency is. So, they're supposed to look at this matter in strictly legal and, dare I say, technical terms. Looking at it in legal technical terms, they decided that LGBT people deserve to have the same built-in protections, the same built-in rights, the same built-in advantages for their committed lifelong relationships as do heterosexual couples. It was not the job of the Supreme Court to decide whether or not gay marriage was moral, whether or not gay marriage was acceptable to society. It was not their job to decide anything concerning gay marriage on religious grounds. So whatever their view of marriage, whatever their beliefs concerning marriage, those beliefs technically are not supposed to enter into their deliberations whatsoever. They're supposed to be looking at things strictly from a constitutional perspective, looking at the law, looking at it technically, and making a decision on that basis. When the Supreme Court made the decision that gay people have every right to enter into lifelong relationships, and therefore they have the right to attain a license through their given state to marry, to be joined. That's all the word marriage means, is to be joined. They use the term marry in plumbing. When you talk about certain pipes or certain fittings marrying into one another, all that means is that they're joined, that they're permanently sealed and joined, okay? So when the Supreme Court made this decision, that became the law of the land. And we had all kinds of people who griped and groaned and said, oh no, Supreme Court can't make decisions like that. They don't make law. Yes, they do, folks. Yes, they do. Many people who know nothing about history, and by the way, this is just the first hour that I'm talking about what I'm talking about now. I've got some really important stuff that's going to start in about 10 or 15 minutes, okay, concerning current events and what have you. But I'm trying to lay some groundwork here for those of you who may not understand how our system was designed to work. It was designed to work this way. In the end, the Supreme Court, in effect, can be the final stop for every law that is ever written or every law that is ever passed. However, if the law that is signed by the president, that's been given approval by the Senate and by the House of Representatives, if a law goes unchallenged, then obviously, legally unchallenged, then obviously the Supreme Court never comes into play. And oftentimes the law is not challenged because smart attorneys are able to look at the merits of the law, and they're able to look at it from a constitutional perspective. They're able to look at the law, they're able to look at it technically, and they're able to say, well, yeah, this doesn't help a lot of people, this hurts a lot of people. However, it does not violate the Constitution, and therefore they're not fool enough to take it to court, because anybody who knows they're going to lose the case is foolish to try and go before the courts and represent a case that they know already in and of themselves is constitutional, and therefore they're going to lose the case. Okay, so that's why many people don't like it when they talk to an attorney and they think they have a case against somebody. They think they have a case and they can sue somebody or they can go to law against somebody. And in speaking to a lawyer, the lawyer winds up saying, unfortunately, if you don't have this, and this, then this case is unprovable. I cannot meet the standard of the law. I cannot present a case that is convincing to a judge or to a jury. I cannot present a case beyond reasonable doubt, and therefore, at this time, I cannot bring the case. And people get angry. They get angry with prosecutors. They get angry with attorney generals in their state because they don't challenge certain laws and they don't challenge or they don't take certain cases. But it's because they don't understand the process of the law. And the process, again, was designed by our founding fathers, and they utilized tremendous wisdom. We have one of the best written constitutions in the world. It's certainly one of the longest standing constitutions. The protections that the Constitution provides us as American citizens are invaluable. The way in which the law is designed to work, the way in which law is designed in America is such that if you are accused of a crime, the case must be provable. In some instances, it's beyond a reasonable doubt. That is the standard in some instances. In some instances, whether it be criminal or civil, you may need to be able to convince the majority of a jury. In some instances, you have to convince the entire jury. It has to be a decision that is unanimous in order to come to certain conclusions in certain types of cases. And all of these provisions, folks, are important. All of these provisions are going to mean that sometimes there will be things in our nation that we don't like, that we're simply going to have to deal with. We're going to have to live with. And that is just the reality of a constitutional republic. Okay? You may have two teams, but that one of those teams is going to be on the winning end of every argument, and one of those teams is going to be on the losing end of the argument. Therefore, it is incumbent upon both teams to cooperate one with another, to work with one another, and in so doing, to devise a compromised version of what it is they're trying to do, that both sides ultimately can agree upon, albeit one side is going to agree upon it gleefully and the other side is going to agree upon it moaningly. They're not going to be real happy per se. They're still not pleased with the ultimate outcome. However, they are pleased that they were able to mute it a little bit. They were able to tamper it down a little bit. They were able to regulate it in such a way that it protects certain things that they are concerned about or that they have specific concerns regarding. That is how a constitutional democracy, a constitutional republic works, folks. It's really not hard. I grew up in school understanding. I had teachers that taught government, and they told us as kids, they said, you're not always going to be happy with every Supreme Court ruling. You're not always going to be happy with every law that is passed. However, we have a representative form of government, which is what a democracy is, a republic is. And therefore, there are going to be those times when we simply have to operate from a place. Again, I'm going to go back to what I was talking about in the beginning. You have to operate from a place of goodwill. Goodwill mandates that you be able to accept the outcome, be it favorable or be it unfavorable. Okay? People of goodwill understand that there are times when the nation today may not be ready for a certain law or for certain things. And that does not mean the nation will not be ready 10 years from now or 15 years from now or 20 years from now. But ultimately, the way our government's supposed to work, ultimately, they should be able to make their argument and persuade the public in their favor to support what they're trying to do, so that in the future they can then perhaps approach that issue again, they can approach it fresh, and they can try to get something done at that point. I have said on any number of occasions in the 23 years Tommy and I have been together, I've told him on any number of occasions, I said, I would have voted for Andrew Young way back in the 80s to be president. He was a black man in government, I want to say in Virginia, if I remember correctly. And he was a smart man. He was a good-looking man. He was a gifted politician. And, I'd have voted for him back in the 80s. But the nation was not yet ready. The majority of the people in this country were not yet ready at that time for a president of color. Yeah, that's unfair. Yeah, that's not altogether a good thing. We understand all that, folks. That doesn't change the fact that the nation simply at that time was not ready. However, the time came, thank God, when our nation was ready, and we were able to get the majority of Americans to support the notion of a person of color in the White House. And it did happen. So while things may not happen as quickly as we would like them to happen in our democracy, the reality is that is how our government is supposed to work. But when you elect people who go into office ideologues, they have certain ideas in their head that they simply are not going to compromise on. They are not willing to negotiate. They are not willing in any way, shape, size, or form to enter into any level of give or take. Then you're dealing with people who are not entering government from a place of goodwill. And that is where we wind up with the gridlock. That is where we wind up with the political battling that we see in our government today. And I hate to say it, but there are ideologues on the left as well as on the right. You cannot simply say there are extremists on one side and there are no extremists on the other. No, there are extremists on both sides. And there are some who are not willing to give an inch in the liberal community, in the Democrat community, as much as there are those on the right who are not willing to give an inch on the Republican or conservative side of the spectrum, or on the other side of the argument. But in the end, people need to understand presidential powers are limited. They are not unlimited. We do not have a king. Our Constitution was designed in such a way so as to prevent a king from ever rising to power in this country. However, in order for that to happen, the people, listen to me carefully, the people, the majority of the people have to be of a mind that we as a nation do not want a king.
A voice of reason in turbulent times with Pastor Charles Burnett-Morrow, speaking truth at a time when truth is in short supply.